ask for any additional resources, personnel, et cetera, that we would need to do just that. It's a vital part of what DHS does. We just need to make sure we do it in a very effective way.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your answer.
Senator Harris.
Thank you. On September 5th, the administration announced that it was ending DACA. Prior to that date, were you part of any decision-making process to terminate DACA?
Prior to that, I ran, it sounds a little bit esoteric, but I was instrumental in putting together the policy process at the White House. So there were a series of meetings within the interagency at various levels of government that I either helped coordinate in terms of establishing the process. In some cases, I participated as a deputy, as one of the deputy chiefs of staff.
So you were a part of a meeting that was held in the White House in the Roosevelt Room in late August that involved Attorney General Jeff Sessions and White House Senior Advisor Stephen Miller and DHS Acting Secretary at the time, Elaine Duke?
I believe so, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And as you know, more than 2 months have passed since the administration decided to end the DACA program for nearly 700,000 young people. During our meeting last week, when the issue of DACA was raised, I was encouraged to hear you say that you want to work on this.
Absolutely.
DACA recipients include, as you know, hundreds of thousands of individuals who are enrolled in colleges. They are working in Fortune 100 companies. They are serving in our military. And every day, since that announcement was made and even before, they wake up terrified. Every night they are afraid that there's going to be a knock on their door at midnight, removing them from their home and tearing apart their family. Under these circumstances, do you agree that legislation must be passed to protect these young people before the end of this calendar year?
I believe that we must and we owe it to them to find a permanent solution. It's no way to expect anyone to live month or 2 months at a time.
And while Congress works on this issue, and hopefully we will be working in a bipartisan way, and I have every hope that that is, in fact, what's going to happen, if confirmed, will you commit that these young people will not be an enforcement priority while Congress is working to fix this problem?
Yes, ma'am.
And in order to participate in the DACA program, the government asked these applicants to share personal information about themselves and their families so that they could qualify for DACA. A frequently asked questions document that was available on the DHS website stated that their personal information would not be used for enforcement purposes. 2 weeks ago, I sent a letter with 38 other United States senators to DHS asking the agency to keep its promise by not sharing the information it demanded from these young people in order to deport them. We have not received a response. If confirmed, do you commit that this information will not be shared for enforcement purposes?
First, I commit to you that we will get you a response.
Thank you.
Secondarily, yes, as I understand it, there are extraordinarily limited circumstances that involve very specifically national or public safety. To my knowledge, there are no other reasons or exceptions to enable that information to be shared for any enforcement purpose. If there are any, I will commit to you to immediately come and talk to you about it and work out a solution together.
And will you commit to this committee, if confirmed, that you will make that interpretation, which is that that information will not be shared for enforcement purposes, that you will make that that policy position clear to all members and employees of DHS?
Absolutely.
Thank you. At a September 27th hearing, I asked Acting Secretary Duke to extend the October 5th renewal deadline for DACA recipients. It did not happen. It has been reported that roughly 21,000 recipients were not able to gather the documentation and the $495 that was required as part of the filing before the deadline. If confirmed, will you reopen the application process and allow these individuals the opportunity to renew their status?
I would commit you to look into it. I'm not familiar with the specific numbers, but if there are extenuating circumstances that we should take into consideration, I would look into those and talk with you further.
I would urge you that part of the extenuating circumstances that should be taken into account is a national survey that found 57% of Americans say that right now they do not have the ability to pay $500 of an unexpected bill. Additionally, there have been a number of natural disasters around the country, including my own home state, where Americans have lost their entire belongings, their paperwork, and they are barely getting through the day, much less have the ability to compile extensive documentation and come up with $495. And I would urge you to prioritize that fact when you think of the extenuating circumstances.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. On February 20th, the DHS released a memo that included 7 factors for immigration enforcement. During a Meet the Press interview on April 16th, former Secretary Kelly stated, quote, "Just because you're in the United States illegally doesn't necessarily get you targeted. It's gotta," I'm quoting him, "it's gotta be something else, and we're operating more or less at the other end of the spectrum, and that is criminals, multiple convictions." Do you agree with that assessment?
Yes, I agree that we should prioritize criminals and any others that in any way are concerning from a national security perspective.
And the definition of criminals is what?
So I would defer to you, but I would follow the law. So whatever the law tells me a criminal is, that is what we would target and nothing less than that.
And in deference to me, and I appreciate that, I would urge you to consider the definition of criminals to be people who have violated the law in terms of violations of the penal code, and those are criminals as opposed to people who are undocumented and in this country because of situations such as the Dreamers, which is that they were brought here as young children and no other home except for this.
Yes, so the criminality that I would be talking about with respect to an enforcement priority is above and beyond the original illegal entry.
And it has been widely reported that between January and September of this year, ICE arrested nearly 3 times the number of individuals with no criminal history as compared to the same period last year. If DHS is in fact focused, as you have indicated and if confirmed under your leadership, on true criminals, it is clear that the frontline officers have a different impression. And so if confirmed, will you issue a written directive to the agents that they prioritize enforcement activities in a way that targets criminals who pose a public safety threat and not Dreamers or DACA recipients?
Yes, although I will say I understand that to be the current policy, but if there's any question about it, we will clarify.
Okay, and in particular, will you agree to issuing a written directive to the agents that is the policy of the agency?
Yes, I would, or if appropriate, Acting Director Holman would.
Great, thank you.
Senator Langford, formula there. Senator Harris.
And I join issue with Senator McCaskill on those points about resources. And just as a point of emphasis on enforcement priorities, we discussed this earlier, but the previous administration prioritized violent and serious crimes and any conduct that would pose a risk to national security. Do you agree that that should be the highest priority, and with limited resources, certainly that is where the resources should go in terms of deportation and enforcement actions?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. You may be familiar with this case, but on October 24th, a 10-year-old girl by the name of Rosa Maria Hernandez was being rushed to a hospital in Corpus Christi for an emergency gallbladder surgery. Customs Border Patrol officers stopped the ambulance and then followed it to the hospital. Immediately after Rosa Maria's surgery was over, she was arrested and taken away from her family. Current DHS policy prohibits enforcement actions at or near sensitive locations such as hospitals, schools, and churches unless prior approval is given or exigent circumstances exist. Despite this, Rosa Maria was apprehended at a hospital after her surgery was over. If confirmed, do you commit to maintaining DHS's policy as it relates to sensitive locations?
I do, and should any further clarification be needed, I would ensure that that occurs.
And in fact, on that point, and I appreciate you making that point, I would urge you to actually issue guidance to agencies, to the agents, if confirmed that this policy exists and this type of thing should not happen again.
I would, and in conjunction with the Commissioner and Director.
Thank you. In your questionnaire, you stated that as DHS Chief of Staff, you had the job of overseeing 240,000 DHS staff and had resourced and budget-related decision-making authority and responsibility for the Office of the Secretary. Last week, the DHS Office of Inspector General issued its annual report on major management and performance challenges facing the department. And the report reads, quote, DHS often fails to update and clarify guidance and policies, ensure full and open communications between employees and management, offer sufficient training, and reduce administrative burdens. Our reports are replete with examples of insufficient training to enable and enhance job performance. Have you read this report?
Yes, I have.
And you are probably aware that the Inspector General issued a similar report last year?
Yes.
So the obvious point there is that there seems to have been no improvement since last year. If confirmed, will you agree to report back to this committee within the first 3 months on what you have put in place to correct course and, in particular, emphasize the importance of training the employees of DHS and clearly communicating policies with them?
I will, and also my other two big takeaways from that report were the needed continued focus on unity of effort and ensuring that we have internal controls as set by leadership. And yes, I would be happy to.
And having had the experience of running a law enforcement agency of almost 5,000 people as Attorney General of California, it is clear to me, based on my experience, that when you are running a large agency, you cannot run it just from the top down. It also has to be from the bottom up. And that means clearly giving guidance and training, in particular, to the good men and women who have the authority, the power, and the responsibility to enforce our laws. And there have been many nominees who have sat in that chair who have had varying levels of appreciation of that point. But I would like you to commit to this committee that you will prioritize training and clear communication and guidance to an agency of hundreds of thousands of people.
Absolutely.
Thank you. At a June Senate Intelligence Committee hearing, a DHS Assistant Secretary for Cybersecurity and Communications asserted that DHS was developing a policy to help states secure their election systems. Just yesterday, as you know and you've mentioned, Virginia and New Jersey had elections. If confirmed, what is the timeline, particularly the deadline, and you and I talked about this in our meeting, for establishing and implementing a DHS policy?
Yes. So as you're aware, then Secretary Johnson clarified that, in fact, election infrastructure is considered critical infrastructure under our partnership model. The Government Coordinating Council has been created. Since we spoke, I have verified that it, in fact, is in existence today. Good. It works closely with the Election Commission. It uses third-party certifiers at the request of state to certify the election infrastructure, and then also provides a variety of other vulnerability assessment and other. So should I be confirmed, I would absolutely, very soon upon confirmation, ensure that we have reached out to all states and territories to ensure that they have what they need for local and state and federal elections. And
are you giving yourself a timeline or a deadline to accomplish that?
I will give myself one, but I will also say to you I'd like to make that deadline in conjunction with the state and local officials, and would be happy to report to you what that is.
Thank you. And it has been reported that the administration is moving forward on a policy that would lead to expedited removal of unaccompanied children who are arriving at the border having fled incredible violence. If confirmed, will you please share with my office any policy memos that the department is planning to implement affecting the processing of unaccompanied minors?
Yes.
And are you aware of the administration's policy shift in that regard?
What I am aware of is that expedited removal, as you know, is limited in most cases to those who are from Canada and Mexico. So I understand there's an intent to work with Congress to ensure that, when appropriate, anybody who comes with an illegal entry can, if they are appropriately in a situation where they need to be deported, to do so in an expedited way to save them from being detained in our country. But I'm not familiar with any particular policy papers or other descriptions.
You are aware, though, that the unaccompanied minor issue, as it has been playing out in the last few years, is not about the children of Mexico or Canada. It is about Central American countries and, in fact, the 5 top murder capitals of the world.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so are you aware of a shift in the administration's policy as it relates to those children?
To anybody from other countries that illegally enter, including those children, yes.
And what is the shift of the policy?
The shift in policy, as I understand it, and again, should I be confirmed, I would definitely dive into the policy papers and descriptions. But as I understand it, the concern is that right now the system is such, due to a variety of other factors, that when somebody does come in illegally, they are detained, and sometimes they are detained for quite a long period of time, as you know.
I'm running out of time, so I just want to ask you one more question. Do you agree with a policy that would expedite deportation of unaccompanied minors who are coming from those Central American countries?
I believe in reuniting children with their families. If their families are not here...
Then are you saying you would deport those children to reunite them with their families who have actually put those children in a process of fleeing violence, and they want those children to be safe and in the United States?
Well, in that case, I would certainly want to work with you to understand more about the implications.
Thank you.
Senator Hassan, again, I apologize for taking out of order.
It's all...